Welcome back to another episode of By Design, where we believe organizations should be run by design and not left to chance. Today I have my good friend, ex-coworker, and recent founder of a new startup, Matt Gabriel, with us from Tech Wheelhouse. Matt, welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Tell us, let's start, just first tell us a little bit about Tech Wheelhouse and your new adventure.
Yeah, so we started about a year and a half ago, and we're basically just doing some Hexagon EAM services support. Saw an opportunity in the marketplace to go provide some support to the community there, and it's been great. We've really enjoyed it, and yeah, every day's a learning experience. So we're just trying to learn one day at a time.
Good. Well, I wanted to have you on because, as you know, by design, we're big in you win with people. People are your competitive advantage. And I know at Tech Wheelhouse, you guys believe the same things, which is awesome. So I wanted to have you on today and just kind of talk about how you're winning with people, how you're using some of the DISC and Working Genius stuff, and how you're building your team. Because, as we've always said, when you're building a startup and you only have a few seats on the bus, it's like paddling in a canoe, right? You get one bad person on there jumping up and down, it could tip your whole boat over. So you have to be very intentional with who you brought on. I know you guys have been, and I want you to kind of talk about how you've done that. But first, when you started with Evoco, I know we always did the DISC profile. You took yours. Tell me about the first time you read the results of your DISC profile.
Yeah, it's kind of an infamous story. Marty loves to tell it that I wasn't a fan of my original DISC results back then. I think I took it in 2017. And yeah, it came back and it said that I was a little bit lower on the D decisiveness and that my C was a little bit high. And so he would always give me a hard time that I didn't necessarily agree with it, but he'd always be quick to point out, see, I told you that's why your C needs to be a little bit higher. But, you know, I do think, you know, and we could talk a little bit more about this, but, you know, as times change and your role evolves and kind of where your focus lies, that it almost like subconsciously makes you choose different answers when you're taking the test and different results. And so, you know, I actually retook the test within the last, I think maybe two years or so. I don't think it was any more recent than that. And it was kind of funny because, you know, the C kind of crept down a little bit, you know, the D kind of crept up a little bit, and the ones in the middle were kind of still the same. But I think it is interesting over time seeing how some of that can change. But yeah, here at Tech Wheelhouse, we're a big fan of both the DISC and the Working Genius. And I think that utilizing both of those to find the right people for the right position, that's the most important part. I think it's critical. Like, I almost feel like you're playing blind if you don't use some of these assessments to find the right people for the right roles.
Well, you're hoping to get lucky. Is
right.
What
Yeah, exactly.
And just for full disclosure, your DISC profile, you're a high IS, and kind of moderate DC, correct?
Correct.
And then your Working Genius is a DG genius and an IT frustration. Correct?
That's correct.
Just, I always like to get that out so people know who we're
That's correct.
Who we're talking
It's my
about.
scarlet letter. Yeah.
That's right. We should wear them around our neck. Well, you mentioned a little bit. How are you guys using these assessments currently? I know, again, you started a company. You had to go out and hire employees. So, you know, kind of how did you bake this into your process at starting a company?
Yeah, so first, everybody that goes through the interview process is taking both assessments. And again, I think it's not going to be the final decision maker for a yay, nay, you know, if you're hiring somebody. But I do think it's important for which role you're in to know that, because if, you know, I use this example all the time, like if I was going to go hire a salesperson, if galvanizing was a frustration of theirs, they're not going to be the right person for that job. I could probably go ahead and say that pretty openly. But, you know, if I'm hiring somebody for more of like a pick up the phone and do, you know, support type tickets and wanting to check the things off their list each day, then I think having a tenacity that's in your Working Genius or your working competency is critical as well. Because if tenacity is at the bottom of your working frustration, then you're probably going to live in frustration if I put you in a role like that. So we're using it during the hiring process, knowing which role we're hiring for. And then also we laugh and joke about it all the time as we're having these conversations, you know, as a group, because especially on the DISC side, how you communicate and how you pair that with your Working Genius, everything else just kind of makes sense once you start, you know, working within your team. And I love that you used, you're just hoping to get lucky if you don't have this information. But I think it's even, like I said, a step further of just like you're playing without all of the cards in your hand on the poker table if you don't have, this information.
Yeah, and I truly believe using it in that interview process before people are on board is such an advantage. A lot of people are trying to go backwards. They've already hired the people, and then they want to give them the test. It's better than not using anything.
Agreed.
But and you said you don't use it as a final yay, nay, which I also agree on, because you may find somebody great and the working genius and disc maybe aren't exactly what you want, but at least you're making that decision with data now. You're looking at it and you're being, by design, saying, okay, we're going to take a chance on this person, even though, right, it's much better than just saying, we don't know what the heck it is. Sure, let's put them in the role and see if it works.
Well, I will say this, Marty taught me this a long time ago, and I think it's really powerful. Like, if you find the right person and there's an open seat on the bus, get them on the bus, then find the right seat for them. I think the working genius can help you find the right seat if you find somebody that, fits culturally, that has a ton of potential that you see, and, there's an opportunity to bring them on. The working genius can also help find the right role. Now, if you're hiring for a very specific role, different story, and that's where I think using it up front is critical. And I do agree with you that, after the fact testing is not as good, but it's still like if by design was walking into a new organization, like obviously you're going to go test their, core team. And so I think it still provides valuable insight for somebody that's maybe a mature organization that hasn't done it. But where we are, I feel like, lessons learned, part of the hiring process just makes everything a little bit clearer.
Yep. And if you haven't done it in the hiring process, you're right. Doing it afterwards at least gives you, I call it the talent inventory, right? You now have your team maps. You kind of know what you have covered, what you don't. And as you go about hiring and hopefully using them on the front end, you can start to fill those skills gaps. Okay, we don't have any T's, right?
Yes.
Well, we better go hire some T's. And if you don't have T's, you're probably struggling to GSD. And I know we throw a lot of letters out here, but GSD is get done. So yeah, I think post-hiring, if you haven't done anything, it's still valuable because you can see where your gaps are, where you might be light, where you might be heavy, and then you can fill in those gaps. Switching gears a little bit, you're one of the best sales guys I know, been around. Do you use these? I know you can't officially every call give somebody a disc or a working genius, but have you used these in your sales career to kind of assess who you're talking to on the client side?
I think it's a great idea. We haven't necessarily provided the assessments for someone that we're talking to, but I have used the story about how we use it and, as part of those sales conversations. I think it builds credibility a little bit, talk about how intentional we are about, finding the right people for different roles. And I have had some customers that were interested in learning more about it. And I think I even may have provided a by design disc profile link to somebody. But overall, no, I don't think we've necessarily used it as like a sales tactic so that it'll better, help us build that rapport. I think it's a great idea.
But how does your knowledge of these assessments and kind of you're kind of a nerd on it like I am. You really dig into it. I tend to just assess people what I think they are without even giving them the test, right? So if I'm sitting in front of somebody,
stereotyping that.
This is probably a D, right? And I better speed up, or it's a low D, I better slow down.
Right.
Do you use that in your sales process of, hey, I kind of get the feeling this decision maker is a low D, and you being you may have to then slow down a little bit to make sure that person is comfortable and, like you said, building that.
100%. I'm doing the same thing as far as it's almost like identifying what you think that they are. That is just like you said, as a nerd of this stuff, it kind of just happens naturally. What I do with that, I think, depends customer to customer a little bit because, I think if I've identified that somebody is maybe like a quick on the heels decision maker, like I'm going to try to leverage that. And if they're cautious, then I might play it a little bit differently. But no, I think there's a lot of potential there for maybe using some of that information during the sales cycle.
Yeah, and you have a partner at Tech Wheelhouse, and what is his disc in Working Genius? Is it the same as yours, different than
No,
yours?
very different, which I think is great. I think it helps us work well together. So on the Working Genius side, you almost flip my Working Genius and my Working Genius is his working frustration.
Okay.
So DG is his working frustration, and I think he's a WT on the Working Genius, but he's taking it several times, and sometimes the W and the I swap from competency to genius. So he's either a WT or an IT. But then on the disc side, he's fairly flat across the DIS, like pretty middle of the road, and then I think his C jumps up a little bit.
Yeah, so can you tell us a little bit about how that works and why it's a good thing and not a bad thing?
No, well, first of all, I think just knowing that about each other helps us work well together. As a galvanizer and a discerner, I find energy in helping, discern amongst things that we're discussing and then help galvanize the team around what those things are, whereas he's obviously frustrated by some of that. But he is very much a GSD type of guy, but he's also, I don't really love this word, but he's kind of a solutioner. Like he'll help, like as soon as we have an idea, he's already thinking about 6 ways to solve it. And if he has enough time and leeway, he'll go ahead and resolve it. So, I think pairing those two, sort of quality and skill sets together has been, definitely an impactful partnership from that stance. Now on the disc side, I don't necessarily, because I've known him for so long and, we've been such good friends, I don't necessarily think about the disc and like how we communicate, with each other and how disc affects that. I definitely am looking more at Working Genius stuff between the two of us and how things are changing and, what problems we're trying to solve this week at Tech Wheelhouse. But I definitely think from a communication standpoint, just knowing each other for so long, so well on a personal level makes that a little bit easier. But yeah, we're very different. I almost think it's kind of yin and yang a little bit, but ultimately that's why I think partnering together was perfect because I'm much more on the sales side and he's much more on the tenacity and services side, and it works great.
Yeah, and that's why we always say, right, there's no right or wrong profile. You need that blend of everything to truly unleash the potential of your team and your organization. So as you got, you said you've been in business about 1.5 years now, probably a little early, but at By Design, we always like to help companies figure out what's next, right? What's that next step? What is maybe next for Tech Wheelhouse? Where are you guys going?
Yeah, so I think, we've been in a pretty steady growth mode, and I don't necessarily see that slowing down right now, although, growth comes with its own set of challenges, and, it's great working with you guys on kind of navigating some of that stuff. We are working on investing in some research and development, trying to build out some of our own solutions that we can pair with some of the services that we do. We're really excited about the potential for that. But I think overall, just continuing to grow organically and try to do it the right way, not too quickly where we, kind of outgrow our britches a little bit, but kind of just, continuing to do the right things better than the other people in the marketplace. That's sort of what we're trying to do. So
you mentioned you're doing a lot of research and development, or some of it. I have to ask, did you use your Working Genius inventory to figure out who should be working on that R&D stuff?
No, but it definitely confirmed our suspicions when we filled, I take that back. We knew what the Working Genius was. We also knew this individual and his skill set and knew that he was perfect for this, and all the Working Genius did was confirm that.
Gotcha. So you have a W in that role,
oh, yeah.
I'm assuming.
100%.
Good. Yeah, so
a WD, which I think from an R&D perspective, having a discerner, that helps because, if you give somebody a sandbox and you don't have that discerning quality there as at least a competency, they're going to just walk around in circles in that sandbox and not know which ideas to focus on. So I think having a WD in that role is perfect.
Yeah, they almost, know the right questions to ask, which helps them, to your point, refine kind of what you're trying to do. And then you'd already mentioned, Jane, your partner's a high I, so there's your invention. Okay, we've got the question we need to tackle. We have our inventor. Now we have our discerners. You're a galvanizer, so you get the team all excited.
Yep.
And I'm sure you have some ETs on your team that can actually
we do
GSD it.
We do, but it's actually funny. I think there's only one other galvanizer on our whole team, which is interesting. But I guess going back to kind of like knowing all of these things and how they fit together, I think that knowing all of these qualities is like having the right pieces to the puzzle. You can't really put the puzzle together if you've got just a bunch of random puzzle pieces from 10 different puzzles, right? So I love having a little bit of everything. I do kind of wish that as we grow, there's going to be a few more galvanizers, especially if we start to build out a sales team, things of that nature. We're definitely going to focus on that. But knowing where you're not weak, but light in certain qualities can also help you fill in some of those gaps so that you've got, a more, level working genius team map.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about using the DISC and working genius from a leadership, from a founder's point of view. Do you see your team using this when they're interacting with each other? Are they like, I guess, rather than looking at it from a top-down perspective, do you see it going across the same levels and your folks using DISC and working genius and going to certain people for certain problems and communicating in their preferred way?
I guess maybe some. I definitely think that people notice, like, when certain individuals send emails out, right? We always use the high D is going to skim through the email and the C is going to have it color coded with fonts and bold and this and that. And like, you can definitely see who on the team when they send out emails does which of those things. But as far as using it amongst each other, maybe subconsciously there's some of that, just like, if I'm going to go to so-and-so and like, I know that he communicates very short and quick and I'm not going to write him a dissertation versus, this person's going to come back with a dozen questions. I might as well go ahead and answer them when I write the email to them. There might be some of that going on.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with you and your partner having different DISC profiles. And this was always a challenge at Advoco because, as you know, Marty was a 99 DI. Steve was basically a 99 SC. And I knew if I was going to go to them with something I needed or a project I wanted to do, or it's two very different messages. I couldn't go to Steve with just 2 bullet points because to your point, he's, well, why are we doing it? Blah, 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 blah. And if I went to Marty with 20 bullet points, he's going to glaze over after the first 2 and just be like, get out of my office. So it is interesting how, like, as employees, it's important they know their leaders. Just because, again, if you want to get stuff done, time is short. If I'm going to Matt, obviously I need to customize my message a little different than if I'm going to your partner who's a C. Right. So it is interesting how people will use that and get to know it and say, okay, if I'm talking to this one, I better give more details. If I'm talking to this one, I better not.
Right. For sure.
And then if you have all eyes, your company happy hours are probably legendary if you have a bunch of eyes on your team. Good. Well, you mentioned a couple times that you've sent the By Design DISC link out to people. I do want to encourage that. That's on our website. That's in the show notes. Feel free to send that to your teams, to your family, to get that out. We love seeing the results. We love seeing the different profiles, and every once in a while I'll get a DM that'll be, to your point, it's like, this isn't me. This isn't me at all. And I always love to say, well, go to somebody you trust, not necessarily your mom or your because you can do no wrong to your mom, but find somebody you trust, give them the results, and say, do you think this is me? Or we had another idea of if you don't agree with it, have somebody else that you trust take it and answer it as you, and see what the results come out.
That would be really interesting. I think I told you this off camera, but my wife took it using the By Design link, and some of her team at her job did it together. They're a sales group for a technology company. And I looked at well, first she handed me a packet and I thought it was hers, but it ended up being someone else on her team. But I looked at the first two letters and I said, this isn't you, you know. And she's like, oh, that was so and so. It's like, here's mine. And of course, everything I was like, checks out. And it's funny because the people that you know the best, like your spouse or even your parents or siblings, somebody that you're really close with, you probably could piece together what they are before you see their results. And it was really interesting, and she was asking a lot of questions, and she's taking the work in Genius too, and just kind of talking through some of that. It does help, I think, at home, knowing how to communicate in different ways, and if nothing else, it's just more information to help you be a better spouse, or be a better parent or son or daughter or whatever. So I'm a big fan of these. I think it's great that you guys have these links to provide, and we're definitely going to continue to utilize them. So
awesome. Yeah. Matt, appreciate your time. I look forward to Tech Wheelhouse and the big things you guys are going to do. Excited to watch it because I think you're doing it the right way. You're putting the foundational pieces in place, and I think the sky's the limit for y'all. And appreciate you taking some time. I know when you're that in the weeds as a startup growing, time is a very valuable resource, and I appreciate you taking some time to come chat with us about how you guys are using the assessments to build your company.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate all the help that By Design has given us, and looking forward to working together more in the future.
Awesome. Well, that's it for this episode. Thanks again, and until next time.